Chapter 1 Introduction. What, where, how, and when. Rashida's question. Rashida sat reading the newspaper. Suddenly, her eyes fell on a small headline 100 years ago. How, she wondered, could anyone know what had happened so many years ago? Finding out what happened. Yesterday, you could listen to the radio, watch television, read a newspaper. Last year, ask somebody who remembers, but what about long, long ago? Let us see how it can be done. What can we know about the past? There are several things we can find out: what people ate, the kinds of clothes they wore, the houses in which they lived. We can find out about the lives of hunters, herders, farmers, rulers, merchants, priests, craft persons, artisans, musicians, scientists. We can also find out about the games children played, the stories they heard, the plays they saw, the songs they sang. Where did people live? Find the river Narmada on map 1, page 2. People have lived along the banks of this river for several 100,000 years. Some of the earliest people who lived here were skilled gatherers, that is, people who gathered their food. They knew about the vast wealth of plants in surrounding forests and collected roots, fruits, and other forest produce for their food. They also hunted animals. Now find the Suleiman and Kirtar hills to the northwest, some of the areas where men first began to grow crops such as wheat and barley about 8,000 years ago are located here. People also began rearing animals like sheep, goat, and cattle and lived in a village. Locate the Garo hills to the northeast and the Vindhyas in central India. These were some of the other areas where agriculture developed. The places where rice was first grown are the north of the Vindhyas. Trace the river Indus and its tributaries. Tributaries are smaller rivers that flow into the larger river. About 4,700 years ago, some of the earliest cities flourished on the bank of these rivers. Later, about 2,500 years ago, cities developed on the banks of the Ganga and its tributaries and along the sea coast. Locate the Gangas and its tributaries called Sun. In ancient time, the area along these rivers to the south of the Ganga was known as Magadha, now lying in the state of Bihar. Its rulers were very powerful and set up a large kingdom. Kingdoms were set up in other parts of the country as well. Throughout, people traveled from one part of the subcontinent to another. The hills and high mountains, including the Himalayas, deserts, rivers, seas, made journeys dangerous at times, but never impossible. So men and women moved in search of livelihood, as also escape from natural disaster like floods, droughts. Sometimes men march in armies conquering others lands. Beside, merchants traveled with caravans or ships carrying valuable goods from place to place, and religious teachers walked from village to village, town to town, shopping to offer instructions and advice on the way. Finally, some people perhaps traveled driven by spirit of adventure, wanting to discover new and exciting places. All these lead to the sharing of ideas between people. Why do people travel nowadays? Look at map 1 once more. Hills, mountains, and seas from the natural frontiers of the subcontinent. While it was difficult to cross these frontiers, those who wanted to could and did scale the mountains and cross the seas. People from across the frontiers also came into subcontinent and settled here. These movements of people can enrich our cultural traditions. People have shared new ways of carving stones, composing music, and even cooking food over several hundred of years. Names of the land. Two of the words we often use for a country are India and Bharat. The word India came from the Indus called Sindhu in Sanskrit. Find Iran and Greece in your atlas. The Iranians and the Greeks who came through the northwest about 2500 years ago and were familiar with the Indus called it the Hindos or Indos, and the land to the east of the rivers was called India. The name Bharata was used for a group of people who lived in northwest and who are mentioned in Rigveda, the earliest composition in Sanskrit, dated to about 3500 years ago. Later, it was used for country. Finding out about the past. There are several ways of finding out what about the past. One is to search for and read books that were written long ago. These are called manuscripts. Okay, because they were written by hand, and this come from Latin word manu, meaning hand. These were usually written on palm leaf or on the specially prepared bark of tree known as the birch, which grows in the Himalayas. Over the years, many manuscripts were eaten away by insects. Some were destroyed, but many have survived, often preserved in temples and monasteries. These books dealt with all kinds of subjects, religious beliefs, practices, the lives of the king, medicines, and science. Besides, there were epic poems, plays. Many of these were written in Sanskrit, others were in Prakrit, languages used by ordinary people, and Tamil. We can also study inscriptions. These are writing on relatively hard surface such as stone or metal. Sometimes kings got their orders inscribed that people could see, read, and obey them. There are other kinds of inscriptions as well, where men and women recorded what they did. For example, kings often kept records of victories in battle. There were many other things that were made and used in the past. Those who study these objects are called archaeologists, and they study the remains of buildings made up of stones and bricks, paintings, sculptures. They also explore and excavate to the find tools, weapons, pots, pans, ornaments, and coins. Some of these objects may be made of stone, others of bone and baked clay or metal. Objects that are made of hard, imperishable substances usually survive for a long time. Okay, archaeologists also look for bones of animals, birds, and fish to find out what people ate in the past. Plants remain survive far more rarely. If seeds of grain or pieces of wood have been burnt, they survive in charred form. Historians, that is, scholars who study past, often use the word source to refer to the information found from manuscripts, inscriptions, and archaeology. When sources are found, learning about the past become an adventure as we reconstruct it bit by bit. So historians and archaeologists are like detective who use all these sources like clues to find out about our past. One past or many. Did you notice that title of this book are past? We have used the word past. Okay, in plural to draw attention to fact that past was different for different group of people. For example, the lives of herders or farmers were different from those kings and queens. The lives of merchants were different from those of craftspersons, and so on. Also, as it true even today, people follow different practices and customs in different part of the country. For example, today most people living in the Andaman Island get their own food by fishing, hunting, collecting forest produce. By contrast, people living in cities depend on other for supplies of food. Differences such as these existed in the past as well. Besides, there is another kind of difference. We know a great deal about kings and battles they fought because they kept record of their victories. Generally, ordinary people such as hunters, fishing folk, gatherers, farmers, or headers did not keep record of what they did. While archaeology helped us to find out about their lives, there is much that remains unknown. What do dates means? If somebody asks you the date, you will probably mention the day, month, and year, 2000 and something. These years are counted from the date generally assigned to the birth of Jesus Christ, the founder of Christianity. So 2000 means 2000 years after the birth of Christ. All dates before the birth of Christ are counted backwards and usually have the letters BC before Christ added on. In this book, we'll refer to dates going back from present using 2000 as our starting point. So, this is the first chapter. I hope you will listen it carefully. We'll meet in the next video with explanation of this lesson. Thank you.